JUGS company and the PIL proudly presents Michele Smith as your guest clinician today. Let's give her a big round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Jeff. That was awesome. Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate that. Wow. I need to bring him with me. He can introduce me anywhere. So. That was great. Well, it is definitely a pleasure to be here. I also want to thank JUGS Sports for bringing me in. I have close ties to Oregon. I graduated from Oklahoma State University. I actually came up and coached at the University of Oregon for 2.5 years before I went to Japan. And at that point, I thought I was going to go to medical school. And I actually wanted to go to medical school in Portland. And had an opportunity to go play ball in Japan. Toyota had recruited me. And the first year they recruited me when I was over at a event. It was a China, Japan, U.S. showdown. I was like, no, I'm coaching at Oregon. I'm finishing up my prereqs, and it's just not good timing for me. Following year, same thing. We were overseas in Japan and China. They asked me again, "Well, come over." And I thought, well, okay. I was done with all my prereqs. I was done with my MCATs. Had my application in one hand to go to medical school, and I had my contract to go play for Toyota in the other hand. And I sat outside the DHL office at Eugene Airport, and I was like, which one do I put in the box? So I was like, all right, I'll go to Japan for 1 year. I'll go for 1 year, save a little money, so I won't be a starving medical student, and then I'll come back and get into medicine. And that 1 year turned into 16 years. So it's funny how life will take you down some interesting roads. But for a while, I wasn't really comfortable with the decision because I took all my medical books over to Japan. So here I was, I'd be like traveling with the team with all these thick books. I'd be reading stuff, and then I'd be like, oh, I should be studying Japanese so I can communicate with my teammates. So then I'd like study Japanese, study all my medical stuff, and then I was like, oh man, it was just confusing. And I went back to Eugene. I was talking with Dr. Singer. He was a team doctor for the Ducks football team. And when I was working in surgery before I went to Japan, I told him I didn't feel comfortable with the decision I made. I said I really wanted to be a doctor to make a difference to people. And he looked at me and goes, who says you're not making a difference? He's like, just because you don't have a scalpel in your hand, you have this softball in your hand. He's like, you're still making a difference. And that freed me. From that second on, I was like, all right, I knew where I was supposed to be, and I was very comfortable with the decision I made to stay in the sport. So we all get to points in our life for a reason, and you guys being coach, you're in a big position to affect a lot of people. So you all could be my Dr. Singer, to other athletes on your teams that you're going to be working with. So that's the reason I love to come and give back and teach coaches how to teach kids, is because you have the power to do a lot of great things. Especially for girls, as women, we love to communicate, right? Probably always talking in practice. You probably have to reel them back in, like, whoa, come on, bring it back in, fish them, bring them back in. But love to communicate a lot of times, and love to feel like they're pleasing you as a coach. It's a big part of our psyche as athletes, female athletes, is that you can never give them too much praise. Good job, keep working on this. If you start stuff out with a positive, it's amazing the difference that you make for a lot of women. A lot of young female athletes. It can turn them around sometimes tremendously. So that's about all I'll say about that. We'll get off that soapbox and we'll get on to hitting. So this afternoon, Florida time, but this morning here, I think what we'll talk a little bit about is hitting and some of the ways you can incorporate different drills into your practice, because let's face it, what's the majority? You have, an hour and a half, 2 hours, maybe if you're lucky, for practice. So efficiency in your practice is going to be extremely important. Being able to almost multitask your drills and what's going on in practice so that you can get the most amount of skill training for your athletes is going to be super important. So real quick on your warm-ups, I would always try to somehow incorporate in your warm-ups your base running. If you're going to have them run around the field, you might as well have them run around the bases, because at least they're working on their bases. If they are running around the field, have them run with their glove on, because you'd be surprised how many times outfielders, they'll go back after a ball, and if this is their glove arm is down. Have them learn to run with that glove on. All these really little things end up making a very big difference when you do it day in and day out. So if they are just circling the field, glove on. They're circling the bases or running the bases, always working proper angles, getting to bags, getting around them, picking up coaches in the right spot so that they're doing stuff. So that would be the biggest thing I would say. Always have a purpose, one or two purposes for everything that you're putting them through. So, I want to keep this super interactive, so if at any point you have questions about anything, well, maybe you heard something, that is different than what I'm saying, whatever it is, just raise a hand or shout it out, because I want to keep this really interactive so that we can get the most out of the clinic here. So we'll talk a little bit about hitting, and because let's face it, hitting is a big part of the game. For some teams, your offense may actually be your defense, depending if you're a very good offensive team. We used to talk about this a lot when I was calling games for Team USA. It's kind of a pick your poison lineup. They put up so many runs that their best defense was their offense, because it was really hard to score 8 or 10 runs. If Team USA is putting up 8 or 10 runs on the board, it's going to be hard to beat them. So it really was their best defense. So some of you, that might be the case. You might have a great offensive team, maybe not as much pitching and not as much defense. For some of you, it might be the opposite. You might have great pitching, great defense, and have a hard time putting runs up on the board. The best part of defense and pitching is that will keep you from losing games. You just might not win games. Offense is what helps you win games. So whether or not you're pushing 1 run across the board or 10 across the board, you have to really figure that out. It's a game of 21 outs, so that's the other thing too, 21 outs. How are you using those 21 outs? Are you a team that needs to sacrifice because you have to move people in the scoring position, or are you more of a slapper, hitting, run type of move the defense? I mean, all those are assessments that you have to make based on the talent that you get every year, and I'm sure every year that changes significantly. So a couple different assessments that you want to make before you really start to train your offense, because if you have a bunch of speedy slappers, the last thing you want to do is try and get them to hit high rise balls out of the park or whatever it might be, right? You have to kind of coach your kids to their talent levels. If you have kids that are not as speedy, that might be more 4 average or gap hitters, they're the ones that you might have to put some bunts down to move people into scoring position to get that hit, versus stealing them or hit and running them into scoring position. So all that is a big part of your offensive philosophy that, within the first week or 2 of having your team, that you try to dial all that into, so that you know best how to train them in practice so they can perform in games. All right, it's always that triangle that we like to talk about. So it's preparation so we can perform, then we have a recuperation or a rebuilding phase, then we come back and we train again. So it's that triangle of always keeping everything in balance. So the first part of the hitting that we'll talk about is just making sure that we're in a proper stance. And I always like to say, it doesn't matter if you're hitting or if you're pitching, this game is so fast that if you start wrong, more than likely you're going to finish wrong, because there's just no time in any of our skills to make adjustments midway through. So it's one of the most overlooked part of our entire sport when it comes to pitching, when it comes to hitting. It's amazing how inconsistent we can be as young athletes on our start positioning. So you might tell your kids all the time that you want them in a certain start position or their hands in a certain spot, and you'll find that one time their hands are here, and then the next pitch their hands might be here or over here. There's a different spot for them all the time, and it's hard to build consistency when you're not consistently starting or training yourself the same way. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time of really talking about how we get in the box so that we can hit the ball properly, and a lot of times it comes all the way down to even just how we grip the bat. Okay, we always want to make sure that we have the bat actually in our fingers. Okay, it should never be in the palm of the hand. So just making sure that they're gripping the bat properly. It's almost like a golf grip. It really has to be out in the fingers. Lay the bat down in this area. And one of the biggest reasons is because of the way our anatomy. Human movement is a big part of any sport. So the first thing we'll talk about real quick is proper grip strength and the ability to grip the bat, and the ability for that ball to fly off the bat head has to do a lot more than anything with the way we grip that bat. So if everyone real quick, just put your dominant arm out and then rest your other arm on your forearm. If you wiggle your pinky, you don't really feel a whole lot. How about your thumb? Not a whole lot. Index finger, not a whole lot. So now I want you to go ahead and wiggle your ring finger and your middle finger. You feel that? You can really feel the belly of your forearm. Those are our gripping fingers. Those are the fingers that when we're holding it onto anything for dear life, those are the things that are really going to sustain our grip. And that's where all the belly of all those muscles in your forearm come in. So those are the fingers that really have to be lined up and locked in. That's where you're going to get all that extra whip and power and pop off the bat. Never back in here. All right, so the first thing is just assess the grip. It's a little thing, it makes a huge, huge difference. So a lot of times you're going to see these fingers or these knuckles, they can be slightly off a little bit, but the point is the bat has to be in the fingers. It cannot be in the palm of the hand. If it's in the palm of the hand, I can promise you, you're going to have slow bat head speed. Slow bat head speed is just like riches to your opposing pitcher, okay? So we don't want that. Little thing, big result. So make sure that that grip is proper. As far as the setup then, getting into the box, I always like to say middle, middle, middle box, and middle back. So middle front, middle back. Now again, sometimes we adjust this. If we're facing a rise ball pitcher, we might want to go to the back of the box. A drop ball pitcher, we might want to come to the front. But just, you know, for being nice and, you know, neutral, we just want to stay middle, middle. All right. NCAA, I know we changed the rules that if your foot is outside of the chalk line at all, you're out. Have they done that at the high school level? I'm sure every state is a little bit different. It's a brand new rule. So because a lot of the slappers were stepping outside of the line. So if any part of your foot now, so if this is the chalk line, if my toe is even like that, I would be out if I contacted the ball. So it's a big change in our game, especially for the inside corner. I don't know if any of you watch when I broadcast, I always talk about the river, or that space in between home plate and the chalk line. We call that the river, like where it's always a battle between the hitter and the pitcher to who's going to own that. You know, a lot of times we see some of this stuff, leaning over, getting hit. So they're trying to prevent more of that. So that's just something to be aware of. Check your rules, make sure that hasn't changed at the high school level, because it definitely changed at the NCAA level. So that's could be something that's coming. So just getting back, middle is going to be really important. We always want to make sure we have a nice base, so a little bit wider than our shoulders, and we always want to make sure our knees slightly over our toes, because we want to be nimble. We want to be able to move. We want to be planted. Okay, we don't want to have our weight back. We want to be nice and relaxed. Everything else is neutral. Eyes are always going to be on target. And I always like to keep the bat on the shoulder until we're ready to go. Once the pitcher now presents, now we're just going to lift the bat up. And we have an inverted V, but at least now we know we're always in the same position. And I know you're working with high school kids, they're usually a little bit more aware of their body, but really make sure that if you're watching one of your kids take 10 cuts, every time make sure her hands are starting in the same position, because you'd be surprised how often their hands or their start is very inconsistent. It's hard to be consistent at anything when you start inconsistently. All right, so that's going to be a big thing. Next thing, your eyes, real quick. Let's talk about the eyes and make sure that we're just getting a good look at the pitcher. All right, so we have to make sure that we're approaching every at-bat and really tracking the ball all the way in. So a nice neutral position, nice and relaxed. And as the pitcher presents, or the pitcher gets on the rubber to present the ball, at that point, now we're ready to go. All right? So that's just going to be really generic, good starting position. At that point, once the pitcher presents and then the pitch is on its way, it's so important that your athletes make sure that they have some sort of movement. It's the same thing as pitchers. We load to explode. Same thing when we're hitting. We have to load. All right? We have to go negative to go positive, however you want to say it. But the key is there has to be some sort of a movement. When I'm pitching a game and I see a batter get in the box and I throw a pitch and they do this and they don't even move and they just watch it, I know they're guessing, because they're not ready to hit. They've done nothing to get themselves ready to go. So every single hitter should get in that box, should be relaxed, pitcher presents, pitch is on its way. And when that pitch is on its way, it's when we load. So we go negative so we can go positive. That front foot goes down, our weight comes back, we have a little circle, so it's that little bit of a load. So now we can track that ball as that ball's coming in. Now we make the decision. Okay, so there should be a little bit of movement, even if it's a ball. There should be some sort of a movement. So just make sure your kids aren't just sitting there and just watching pitches go in, because a lot of times they're just guessing. All right, they have to put themselves in a position to be ready to react, okay? All right, so nice and relaxed, pitcher presents, pitch is on its way. Now I make a decision. All right, it's a strike. At this point, I'm going to rotate on that back side. As I rotate on that back side, I want my belly button or my hips to come through so that I'm not over-rotated. That's the big king here. We don't want to be over-rotated because I'm going to pull off the outside pitch. So we want to have a nice rotation of the hips. I like to think about my belly button being a camera, taking a picture of the ball. So on an inside pitch, I'm going to be here. Pitch down the middle a little bit less, outside pitch even a little bit less, so I can take that ball the opposite way. All right, so that puts us in a position now that because it's the strike, we get rotated, we're taking a picture of that ball. Now let's talk a little bit about the actual swing. what are our hands doing? Short to, long through. Probably the greatest little buzzwords you can say to your kids. We want to be short to the ball. Short to, and then we'll talk about follow through in a little bit, but long through, long aggressive follow through. Short to, long through. You can say it very easy. It's a great coaching tip from the box. Just reminding kids to stay short. We don't ever want that bat head to cast out. As soon as it casts out, we get long. When we get long, a good pitcher is going to attack them underneath the hands. Okay, so a couple of visuals, right? Because we think in pictures. That's where that saying, see it in your mind's eye. Tell your kids what you want them to do. A couple of different ways you can say it. We all learn differently. Knob, throw the knob of the bat to the ball. So that'll get their hands coming to the ball. You could think knob to the bat. Top hand, you could think top hand. I want you to slap that ball with your top hand. Again, we all learn differently, so different buzzwords might help different kids. Another visual is really good. That bottom hand is like throwing a frisbee. All right, a great drill for your kids is going to be a frisbee, and just have them and throw that frisbee. Maybe, well, for me as a lefty, I'm going to throw it through the 3-4, outside through the 5-6 hole, or back up the middle, but I'm throwing that frisbee. Okay, same thing for righties. They're going to be throwing that frisbee with the left hand. So for me, it's with the right hand. But what that does is you're leading with that elbow, so I'm getting my hands short to the ball. When my bat follows my hands, that means my bat head is going to be short too, and that's what we want. Okay, you see a lot of times, you get up against a fence, take some cuts against the fence, should be able to stand right up against a fence one bat length away and take a full cut and not hit that fence, right? If they start casting, that bat head is going to hit the fence. All right? So that's kind of the path that we want to think about. Getting a little bit more advanced is that we want this bat head to stay through the strike zone as long as possible, in the sense that we don't want to in and out. Okay, some kids will practice their swings like this. You have to be perfect to have this bat head show up at the exact same time if the angle of your swing is down and through. We really want this bat head to stay through this plane, right? Because this is a three-dimensional strike zone. It's not one-dimensional. It's a three-dimensional strike zone. So that if this bat is in that strike zone, anytime that ball shows up, you have a greater percentage, a greater odds to hit that. Okay, and I've been fortunate over my career. I get to throw to, at times I would throw to Major League Baseball players, and so I was talking with Wade Boggs, and I was like, why are you such a great hitter? Why are you a Hall of Famer? And he just said, Michele, for me, I just would try to keep my bat head in that strike zone as long as possible. He's like, it was that simple. He's like, I knew if I kept my bat head through here, flat through that zone, and that ball was going to show up, he's like, I knew I was going to hit it hard somewhere, and I was going to hit it on a line. He's like, now whether or not there was a shortstop or a second baseman there to catch it, I didn't have any control of that. But that was his philosophy, is just to really keep that bat head, so he increased his odds. And he's a 300-plus hitter. He's one of the best, probably 4 average hitters in the game of Major League Baseball. Didn't have a ton of power, but again, a lot of that I think is also his stature, stuff like that. So that's another concept for some of your kids that are having a hard time with batting average, is just really watch their bat head. How long is it through that strike zone? Keep it through that strike zone as long as possible. Okay, so that's the swing. So let's talk a little bit about the follow through, the eyes, and how we strike the ball. So once we're to contact, I want all the kids to think about we're short to, and then long and aggressive follow through. So I want to think about reaching out and trying to almost touch the center fielder on the head with this bat. And that's going to keep us long and aggressive. It's going to help us use the field of play. We don't want to be around the ball and over here, because now I'm only using about 15% of the field. All of your righties. How many of you guys have righties? And you're in the third base box, and when the right-hander gets up, you're like this. You're like, bye-bye. I'm going to go hide behind the dugout. Yeah, because they're a pull hitter, right? That's where, or you're like, hey, throw me a glove, so you can, or give me that batting helmet. Yeah, because you're going to get peppered with line drives shooting down. So a lot of those kids are way over-rotated. So now it's like the field is shifted. So I'm showing right-handed now. So it's like the field has all of a sudden gone, whoop, right? And so those are the kids that we have to get their hands inside the ball and get them driving through to center versus being here and shooting everything toward you as a coach, okay? So we just have to we have to move the perspective a little bit more and get those hands coming back up through the middle and driving. Short two, long through. Okay, another thing that's really important for you as coaches. How many of you will watch your kids take BP from either behind your pitcher or behind the catcher? Okay, so really, really helpful to do that. Or in a tunnel, if you're lucky enough to have a hitting tunnel or anything like that. The perspective that you can see, it's amazing, because you usually find there's two trends. There's two types of hitters. There's your top ball hitters and your bottom ball hitters. Your bottom ball hitters are the kids that pop up. 70% of their outs when they're out are pop-ups. And then you have your ground ball or your top ball hitters, where 60-70% of their outs are ground ball outs. And so you just have to give them different perspective, but if you watch them, you can see it as clear as day. All right, this is a bottom ball hitter, this is a top ball hitter. Is that the way our brain works and what we're seeing, the perspective as that ball's coming in, you want to tell your kids, if they're a top ball hitter, you need to tell them, I want you to aim for the bottom of the ball. And that's going to help them get through the middle and kind of shoot that ball off more consistently. Okay, for your top ball hitters, again, top ball hitters, you want to tell them to aim at the bottom. For your bottom ball, your pop-up, your kids that pop up, opposite, tell them to aim for the top so they come into the middle. But watch from behind. You'd be surprised how much you will learn about their swings. All right, big part of it, so that you can help coach them. And then the eyes of the hitter. We'll talk a little bit about tracking that ball. It's so important that they're starting out in a good position as a pitcher presents, and they're watching that pitcher. I can't tell you how many times with Team USA, during our pre-Olympic tours, we would go around, we'd play like 50 games before we would head over to the Olympics. It was like barnstorming, it was raising awareness, it was awesome, it was a lot of fun, but we'd play a lot of local teams, and after the game was over, the local team would be the first in line to get autographs. It was amazing to me how many times I'd be signing autographs, and signing, they'd be like, oh, cool, you're left-handed. And I was like, yep, and that's probably why I just struck you out, because you're probably looking at me thinking I'm a right-handed pitcher. You know, I'm like, you make sure your kids are, if it's a left-handed pitcher, they're watching it off the left hip. And you laugh about it, but it is amazing how many times kids will say that, and because they don't know what they're looking at. And granted, sometimes it's different, like with the Olympic team, because they're just like, oh my gosh, I'm playing against people I grew up watching. So it can be over, and they're just like, I don't even know what I'm doing here. I'm just, swinging at whatever. But it's a big part of it. Make sure, and you might be playing the #1 team in district or wherever. Sometimes kids, they psych themselves out, and they're just like, there's just a fuzzy thing out there, and all of a sudden there's a yellow ball shooting at them. Make sure that they're watching that ball out of the hand. And if you're seeing this, it's a rise ball. If they're seeing that, if they're seeing more ball than fingers, it's probably going down. Or thumb's probably going out. Pulling across is probably coming in. So really tell them to watch. You can identify a lot by seeing that snap or that release of that pitcher. So that's a big thing. Okay, the other thing, make sure their eyes are level. Most of the times by high school they have straightened this out, but you know how it is, the little kids, they're like, and they want to see everything like this from this perspective. Every once in a while you still see it, even at the high school level. Make sure their eyes are on plane. Nothing looks good in life like this, right? Well, maybe a couple things, but that's about it, all right? Definitely not a pitch, all right? Definitely not a ball coming at you 50 miles, 60 miles an hour. Okay, so eyes on plane, looking at that release point, tracking it all the way in, head down, short two, long through, coming around the body. Now we come up and we find the ball, okay? So real quick, those are just real quick key points to getting your kids hitting the ball aggressively. Let's face it, it's offense. We have to be offensive. We have to go get the ball, all right? Especially if you're facing a strong pitcher, okay, or a more offensive pitcher. You've got to, you can't beat good pitchers by keeping the bat on your shoulder, okay, especially if they're controlling the strike zone. So let's talk about a couple drills, a couple things that you can do to really help your kids learn proper technique. So one of the first things that I love to do are breakdown drills. And to me, this is like the best invention ever. It's when JUGS came out with this little T, because as many times as we can isolate a certain part of the body, it makes it easier on our brain to focus on what we're doing, okay? So if we can do breakdown drills, that's a really big part of getting your kids knowing what they're doing. So a breakdown drill basically is we're gonna shorten up on the bat, we're gonna use a little T, and we're just gonna work on our movement. So we're gonna work bottom hand, top hand. And normally I like to say 3 to 5, depending on, again, how much time and how many kids you have. But 1, you know, so you're putting the ball in there, 2, 3, 4, 5, top hand, and then both hands together. And we're not following through. Everything is just stopping right at contact. Right at contact. This is all we're working on, is that plane. So this is one of my favorite drills. These are breakdowns. Okay? And then both hands together. Once they get proficient at that, then you can get a little bit more and go through and get that long, aggressive follow through where they're driving that ball into the net. So breakdown drills are excellent, and this tee is perfect for that. You can adjust the height of it a little bit as well. Okay, tees, regular tees. One of the reasons why tees are so good is because you're not worrying about what the ball's doing. You know where the ball's at. The ball is right there. So the perfect position for you to be able to worry about the things that are important. My toe touch, my hands to contact, my eyes, right? And that's really the reason that we use tees over and over and over, especially even at the elite level. Young kids don't like it. They're like, oh, it's boring. You know, they want the live. They always want the live, okay? It's the worst thing you can do as an athlete is just get spoiled and always want that live, because you're not focusing on what you're supposed to be focusing on. It's practice. In practice, we're focusing on our body. We're training our body, okay? We're not worried about the ball. We're not worried about the pitcher. We're not worried about the defensive setup. We're worried about our body. So the best thing you can do is have your kids rip dry cuts. I'd make them all. As their warm-ups, take 30 dry cuts and just learn. Inside, middle, outside. All right, that's probably one of the biggest things that I learned playing ball overseas, is because they don't have a lot of room and the ability to always practice a lot, they focus on their body. And I've seen 12-year-olds that have swings as good as Major League Baseball players because they stand for hours for hundreds of swings and they watch themselves, even if they just have a tee and they're just swinging off the top of the tee, even if the ball isn't there because they're inside. They just spend hours doing this. And they'll watch themselves either in a mirror or in a hotel room. Every night I would look down before a game. 11 o'clock at night, my teammates would be down in the parking lot of the hotel using the lobby mirrors as a reflection and just taking cuts, you know, visualizing the picture they were going to see, and just spending an extra 200-300 swings learning the mechanics. Huge, huge part of the game. So getting back to the tee, it's the ball, and it's all about you as the athlete. It's all about the toe touch. It's all about striking the ball. You can tell your kids, all right, I want you to take 20 off the tee. You're going to hit 10 of them on a line into the net, and then I want the next 10, I want you over the top. We're ball angling down. Runner on third. I want you top of the ball, boom, bash it into the ground, and that runner on third, the second it's ball angled down, the second you see that ball coming off the bat at a downward angle, you're heading home. So it's not quite a hit and run, it's on contact. So it's an on contact and run. Okay, and if you have any sort of speed, it's one of the best things. Because, you know, a hit and run, you're already committed as a runner, whereas this, it's a millisecond after, so that you're not as vulnerable to be picked off. But those little things, if you train your kids for that, you know, it makes a big difference. How many of you know who Crystal Bustos is? Okay, so last weekend we were in Ohio, and she was talking, and she's hilarious. She's such a good person. She's like the ultimate teammate. She'd do anything for you. I've seen her hit a ball further than I think any human being could possibly hit a ball. And I remember this. We were playing in a game, and the pitcher, the ball like slipped out of her hand, and it was like cricket. It bounced before the plate, and she still swung at it and hit it out of the ballpark. And we're all like, who does that? She's like, well, I practice that. And we're like, what? You do not practice? She's like, no, I do. I practice that. I'm like, Bustos, you're unreal. But anyway, but her idea of practicing it is that even, you know, you could do drills off of the tee, and then you can bounce drills. And so that was her you bounce the ball off of the ground. It's a timing drill. You bounce it off and then you hit it. But you'd be surprised at things if you practice stuff. At some time it will show up in a game, because you know how baseball and softball are. You think you've seen everything, and then something happens and you're like, I've never seen that before. And there you go. So it is important just to continually think outside the box and work on stuff. So I also like to work, obviously, inside outside. So maybe you're going to work 10 balls outside, 10 balls inside. I also like to work them one-on-one. So you're putting up 2 tees at the same time, and you can use them in this setup. Or, there's also tees that have 2 actual tees coming out of the base. Same sort of thing. You can work on low and inside, high and outside, and just work repetition. 1, 2. So you're immediately teaching your body, this is how I'm reacting on the inside pitch. This is how I'm reacting on the outside pitch. Okay, so that you're really training them. So, high ball. Most of you play on fields with fences, so you do have opportunity to sometimes get the ball out of the park. Okay, well, because it's amazing how the game has changed. Even when I played in college, not every collegiate program played on a field that had a fence. In fact, Jay Miller was the head coach at Missouri, and we went up to play Missouri for our Big 12 conference game, and he took the outfield fence down, because we were the top home run hitting team in the country, and he took so his kids were out there at like 250, 300 feet. He'd be like, doop, 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 boop, catch out, boop, catch out. Yeah, back in the day, you could do those things. I think it was my junior year, I led the country in home runs. How many I hit, do you think?
25.
Oh, bless you. No. How many? A little bit lower. Didn't even make it to double digits. 9. Led the country with 9 home runs back in the day. Okay. My point being is that we do need to practice the high ball. We do need to practice hitting the high ball. Nowadays, because we do, a lot of the fields we play on are either a 190 or 200 foot fence down the line. You can take a high pitch and hit it from high to higher and drive it out of the park. But again, you have to practice it. And there's nothing wrong with setting up your tees at the top of the strike zone. And if you teach your kids, there's again a couple of rules of thought on this. If you have a big, strong kid, don't be afraid. This is Tim Walton in the University of Florida all over. He's going to teach his kids not to lay off that pitch, but to go get it and drive it from high to higher and get it out of the park. All right. Back in the day, it used to be, get on top of it and try to drive it down. So people always ask me, what's the best way to hit a rise ball? Usually I say, don't swing at it. That's the best way to hit it, right? It depends on who's throwing it, right? If you can catch up to it, you can definitely hit it out of the park if you're playing on short field, short deck, or you have to stay through it, okay? But again, that's another great concept, to be able to adjust the tees, set them up. We even will take times where we'll take buckets, and I'm just going to show you for visual, but take buckets and you put the tee on top of the bucket, so you're still really getting through it, really getting through the ball. So don't be afraid to practice stuff that might seem a little bit out of the ordinary, because again, it challenges your kids, and challenge is good because it keeps them interested, it makes it a little bit of fun, and you never know when that situation is going to show up. So, all right, so those are a couple really good drills for inside outside. This real quick. The other thing I like to do a lot of times with 2-ball drills is, and the balls that you have there, these are the new JUGS leather balls that you can actually throw through pitching machines, which is great because I love to do game case situations. So you put the pitching machine out on the field, you have your defense, you have your hitters come up, and you run a game case, you run game situation, and because these are leather balls and they have the lower seams, it's easier for your defense to play it out than versus a machine ball, which these are great for cages and stuff like that, but those are fabulous for being able to play out what I like to call game case situation. Again, it's working the defense, it's working your offense, it's taking pressure off your pitchers, not having to worry about that. But in either case, you can take markers and even just put a red line and a blue line, and you could be like red is no, green is go, green, blue, whatever one you want. And so anytime a red ball comes through, they see red, boom, they're not swinging for whatever reason. So again, training them to be reactionary. Our sport's is all about reacting to the situation that's going on. The other drill that I think is super important is just a tap drill, getting into that loaded position. So sometimes we like to isolate or break down the swing. And I used to do this a lot just to keep you from pulling off the ball. How many of your kids sometimes will pull off the ball, or they get down on their heel and then spin off, right? They will spin off. All right, so we obviously we don't want to do that. So one of the best ways to try to train kids on that is just a simple tap drill. So you have them set up, and even when you're hitting into a net or whatever it might be, if you're on a field, you always want them visualizing and looking up as if this is my power line and that ball's coming down the power line. So I want to be looking at that, and then I'm going to tap. So a lot of times we'll just have it do a tap drill. So we'll go 1, 2, 3, and then swing and go through. So it's a nice little tap drill. It teaches you to keep that weight back, to feel what it's like. How many of your kids have a tendency to hit like this? They want to hit off that front side? Yeah. Okay, it's very common. A lot of young athletes, they know they're doing it at times after the fact, and when they're in the middle, they just have the hardest time feeling this. So this is a really good drill that just gets them to feel what it's like to stay on that back leg. So 1, 2, 3, and swing through. So I like to do that off of the tee. So just 1, 2, 3, and then through. 1, 2, 3, and then through. So just good little drills to get them working on feeling what it's like. Another drill that I like to work with, Happy Gilmore's. I'm sure you have heard them, right? Or one-legged. So you can do these a couple different ways. And these aren't just for slappers, you know. A lot of times it's just feeling yourself walk through. So they call them Happy Gilmores, where you're walking through, or walk-throughs either way. But you're going to just stand back away, and you're going to walk yourself up, present, feel all that weight on the back leg, toe touch, and then through. Same thing. Walk through, toe touch, come through. Okay? Just getting nice and explosive. So doing about 5 sets of those, so about 10 cuts, and then standing in. You could do a couple toe touches, boom, and then a couple just regular off the tee. So you always want to make sure you're going back to what you want, so you have your drills come off your baseline, and then come back to baseline. Does that make sense? Saw a couple puzzled looks on that one. All right, because we're always using a drill to work on some part of the swing, whatever we're correcting, and then come back to what we really want to work on. Okay, another drill that is one of my favorites it's kind of along the same concept as Happy Gilmore, or feeling off that back leg. Again, these are for your lunge hitters, is just swinging off the back leg. So the front leg is up. So we're working balance. And I'm just going to work on getting through the ball, but keeping my foot up the whole way. And again, this is just a drill, but it's just getting me to feel what it's like to feel everything off the backside of my body, so that when I actually am now using my front foot, I can feel myself really building that energy between my front side and my back side. So it's just staying nice and balanced, front foot up. Just staying through, okay? So again, it's a good challenging drill, because at first the kids are going to be like, whoa, and then they're going to get used to hitting it. So a lot of fun, challenges them a little bit. Let's see. So those are your one legs. So we've got our steps, we've got our 2 balls or 2 tees. And then let's talk a little bit about actual tosses. We have a toss machine, which is great. Again, I think these are really good when you want your kids to work on their own. Okay, when you're in an actual practice situation and you can toss, then what I like to use is this light flight net, or what I call it. It's like a slow pitch net. So I'm going to grab this over there. One of the girls around that can. Oh, okay, all right. And the other thing that these are great about, so we would use these in Japan all the time. And whoopsie, thanks. And so front toss is a big part of the game, okay? And what we would do is that we would just throw regular front toss from behind here. So now you have the opportunity for your athletes to be working on a hitting ball. So again, it's all progression. You have your dry cuts, maybe your tee work, progress up to this situation where you're using a front toss. Now front toss you can do a couple different ways. You can, if you're inside, wiffle balls are awesome, okay? Super easy, super quick. Even outside, if you only have 5 or 10 minutes before a game, it's great because they don't fly very far, so that you're not wasting a lot of time chasing after balls. Even the same with the light flight balls. These are good too, to use. But if you're outside and you have the ability to have enough time, we're just working at tossing the ball right off the side. And this is how I actually throw my front toss. I throw it right off. I throw it right-handed, even though I'm left-handed, because I'm like, this arm does enough of that that I want to save it. So I would throw tons of front toss just like this. And just kind of throw it on a line so it's a flat pitch coming in. All right, so if you can do as much front toss as possible, this is probably one of my favorite drills, where the ball's actually moving without just throwing, without just pitching. How many of you guys pitch batting practice to your kids? Okay, yeah, it's good, but you can't beat it. Yeah, and you probably you're gonna throw it at a shorter distance. You're not just throwing it at 43 feet from the rubber all the time. You're gonna pull it up a little bit, but this is another great way to get reps in immediately. So another variation of your front toss is 2 plate. So this is not to scale. Pretend that's a plate, not a tee. All right, so, and this is just going to help with variations of speed. So you're going to have your players take 5 cuts from the back tee and then move up 5 cuts from the front tee immediately. Okay, and you can even just do 3s. You could do 3-3, you could do 2-2s, whatever it is. But the key is that you're having a move. And it's the same variation of the drill, but just moving that distance makes a big difference. Now you're adjusting pitchers that either throw change-ups, or say you're facing a team that's got 1 fireballer, 1 thumber. So you're making them have to adjust within the same drill to adjust to speeds. Okay? Any questions? Any questions on that? But again, this is a great drill, and this is a great net for that, just because it's easy to break down. Obviously, a screen is going to be better for you than a net in that situation. So you want to get plucked in the head if you're trying to pitch from behind a net. Okay? All right. Do you want to take a couple cuts? Awesome. So one other thing I want to talk about real quick, because soft toss, how many of you guys soft toss to your kids, or have your kids soft toss to each other, right? Big part of the game. All right, so Kelly's going to help me out. I'm going to throw some soft toss to her, because I want to talk about proper soft toss, because I see this all the time. You see soft toss that's not thrown properly, and when it's not thrown properly, it actually hurts your player's swings. So you see this, you can just catch this. You see this all the time. You see someone throwing soft toss, and what do? They're throwing it right at the hitter. All right, the proper way for her to hit that would probably be hit it right back at me. All right, that's not soft toss. Soft toss should never be at the hitter. Proper soft toss is just going to be like you're tossing the ball up so it just stops like it's sitting on a tee. You're not going to get hit, you just have to reach underneath, and I'm just going to pop it up. And I'm out of harm's way. But you can see it puts her in a situation to be able to make a good cut versus if I don't hit this, if I throw it at her back hip. All right, that's terrible. There's no way she can hit that ball with a good swing when it's coming at. That'd be like the first baseman pitching to her, okay? The first baseman doesn't pitch to her.
Do it standing up, though, to be like Mikey.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like this. Yeah, so he'd be like, so how was it, did you go to the mall last night? Or whatever it is I want to talk about. Yeah, exactly. It's like, bah! Yeah, exactly. So that was pretty realistic. So, all right, so you can even do this standing up, but again, I'm just reaching up and I'm putting it in a situation where she can just come get it as if it's sitting off a tee. So that's proper soft toss. Just reach in, pop it up, and back out of the way. So it's not a problem. So, all right. Any questions? Any questions on that? All right, and I'm sure there's a gazillion other drills and stuff that we could talk about. Are there any questions or any other drills that that you guys might want to discuss before we take a little bit of a break, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about some offensive stuff? Yeah.
I think it's important on that soft toss. I always have kids do it to kids.
Yeah.
To get them to coach each other. I mean, that's
Absolutely.
the hardest thing to do.
Yes.
Keep you watching them. They can't see themselves.
Yes, no, absolutely. It is so important for, and you always know your best athletes are the ones that are going to be able to say, oh yeah, you know, she's rolling over, or she's, you know, hitting off her front side. They should be able to see each other, and that's why a lot of times when I do pitching clinics, I make the pitchers throw back and forth to each other, because you should be watching that pitcher and being like, oh, her hips over rotated, or oh, her weight's too far forward. You should be picking all that up. Your hitters should be, you know, they should know what their swing is supposed to feel like. Wrong, right, you know, and stay locked in. You know, I like to say be present, be where your feet are. A lot of kids are, you know, like their body's here, but their mind is woohoo over there somewhere, you know. So, and it is hard. I mean, today's society is, you know, bottom line, sideline, you know what I'm saying? You watch TV and there's like 20 bits of information coming off the TV screen at you. So we're used to just being overstimulated. So getting them to visualize what they actually need and where they need to be is going to be a big part of it. So, yeah. Any other questions real quick? How many of you guys, because it can be a little rainy here in Oregon at times of the year, how many of you actually practice like inside, like in a, right? So same thing in Japan with our pro team. We had a stadium or a big indoor arena like this. We had a light flight machine, and we would play a game inside with those. And as you know, that's like one of the nastiest pitchers I've ever seen. I mean, those balls are like, whoo, whoo, whoo. Yeah, they can be all over the place, which again is great. It doesn't have to be super fast, but it just teaches you to really be able to track the ball and eye-hand coordination. Don't be afraid to dial that stuff down. Those are great. I think anytime you can challenge your kids and get them out of their comfort zone, it's going to help them grow. It's going to help them be better, because they have to figure out a way to make it work. So if that light flight machine is, you know, if you crank back the distance and that ball's really moving, shorten up a bat, get a smaller bat, and just really work on eye-hand coordination. You get a little bit closer, then obviously it's got really good consistency to it. But then you're working more speed. Again, the toss drill is great for kids on their own, you know, that can just go off and work on hitting at various angles from you. And then I know that the new change-up machine that JUGS came out with, that's a big part of your ability to work varying speeds. The other thing that I think that we underutilize, because again, we're talking about how do you get the most amount of skill work into your hour-and-a-half or 2-hour practice. I think one of the most underutilized aspects of machines are your ability to use it for defense versus fungo hitting everything. When you're doing full team defense, don't be afraid. It must be on a timer. It's got to be, right? You gotta need to move more, I guess, maybe. I don't know. But don't be afraid. How many of you use your machines for defense? Okay, so especially the change-up machine, the thing that I love about it is that it can be pop up to your shortstop, right? You don't have to, crank back so it's like a gazillion foot pop up to the shortstop, right? It's a slower speed, so now you're going to get those dumps between your middles and your outfield versus full speed. It's going to be a further shot back. So all those things, all those different variations, same thing if you're throwing it into the ground. Makes a big difference, because just the ability to throw the ball up. The biggest reason why I have a hard time fungo hitting, or I don't always like to fungo hit when I've got teams out there, is that when you're trying to hit that ball hard and get a relay play to the outfield, if you hit the ball, you've got your middle infielders, your corners, your pitcher, you have people in front of you that sometimes you're mashing the ball right at them. When I was in high school, we were doing a pregame warm-up. This was my junior year, and I had turned around because they were hitting to the outfield, and my coach hit a ball right into my elbow, into my pitching elbow. So you have to be careful. And again, I know it's a little different when it's pregame versus when it's practice, but that's one of the best things I think that for machines that can be underutilized. If you turn that in, 10-15 minutes, you get in a really good defensive practice for the whole team, because you can be shooting a ball over to your left fielder, boom, shoot one down the line to your right fielder. I mean, at any point in Japan, we would have 3 or 4 balls on the field. Right fielder coming into third, left fielder coming into third, right fielder coming into home. So they always knew where they were at. So there was constantly balls moving around. Everybody was always moving. So you get a lot more done than that. So, all right. Any other questions on hitting? I know that was kind of like a lot of information all at once. So between the mechanics and some of the different drills. Do you guys do hitting stations? What's your typical offensive package like? Do you have cages outside that you put the kids in? Mm-mm. So you're hitting live on fields then, or machine, or some sort of hitting into the field of play? Okay.
We go 4 stations on our field.
Yeah.
Soft toss, guy throwing live, someone else throwing front top.
Yep. Tee down lines and all that. Yep. So you can always throw in base running into that too, especially off the live stuff. They have to work their way around the bases based on the way the live hitter. So it's another really good way to get them reactionary on the bases. It's a big part. We would do that as well. Last thing I want to talk about real quick, and then we'll take a quick little 5-minute break, is just bunting. I just want to throw a little bit of information at you about a proper way to bunt. So back in the day when our game was at 40 feet, the professional and Olympic game didn't change to 43 feet until 2002. So there was, so both my Olympic games we played at 40 feet pitching distance. So you can imagine 70, 72 miles an hour at 40 feet. There wasn't always a lot of scoring going on, and so the ability to have a short game was super important. And there would be games in Japan that we didn't pay international tiebreaker, that it'd be like the 14th or 15th inning, and I would be like, score, please score for me, because I don't want to pitch anymore, So, and we would not execute at times, because a lot of my Japanese teammates would bunt like this, and their weight would be back, because they would wait, I'm like, this is a sacrifice, it means you're sacrificing, I'd go through the whole spiel, like square early, and they didn't want to square early, so a lot of them would try to bunt like this, almost like they were sneaky bunting, and so their weight would be back. So I actually would get a lot of my teammates to start, I call this back leg step around. So a lot of times we either are taught to just completely square. You have to be careful. Don't touch home plate here, because you obviously are out. Or pivot, now you're not very balanced. So what I like to teach our kids, and I ask them all to do, and it made a huge difference with our ability to get the ball down, is your back leg becomes your front leg. So I'm a left-handed hitter right now. My back leg becomes my front leg. So I step all the way around. I get myself in this position, everything else stays the same. Boom, I put the ball, and I'm in a great position to head off. I'm a right-handed hitter, same thing. So now my back leg becomes my front leg, boom, I put it down. So does a couple, you're gonna step right around it. So it's behind you. So now you're in a much better position right? You're in a better angle. Because what happens a lot of times? Finally get someone on base, you're like, woo, no, okay, you're gonna sacrifice them. So what do we tell our kids? Sacrifice punt, where do they go? Whoop, whoop, whoop. You're supposed to bunt out of the front of the box. You might as well just say to your opponent, hey, I'm bunting, right? Because you move up to the front of the box when you've been hitting back here all day, or for every other at bat, people know immediately. You tell the pitcher, you tell the battery what to throw, you tell your corners to come on up. So the other thing that's great about this is you get into the box in the same exact position. They don't know what you're doing. You haven't thrown your cards on the table. So when you're in this position, ball is on the way, step around, boom, put it down, and you're gone. So I'm telling you, it makes a huge difference. Just try it. It's a super little thing, but it will make your bunter so much more consistent. So much more consistent. So. All right, any questions on that? Any questions?
Good job.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hey guys, we're going to take a 5-minute break. Do not eat the food that's out there right now. We're going to wait so don't eat the food. I know some people at Walm, stay away from it. So let's take a 5-minute break, and then we'll do pitching, and then we'll have lunch.
Awesome.
Okay?
All right.
Thank you. Thanks, Michele.
So it is always, when I go do clinics, a lot of times I'm traveling and I'm like, who wants to catch? And there's always like a dad out there who's like, I want to catch. I catch for my daughter. And I'm like, all right, how good's your insurance? Or they come in and they're like, all right, I'm ready. And they don't have a mask on. So I'm like, ooh, okay, I'm going to make sure I throw this a little high. So if he happens to miss it, and, I'll be like, especially if I'm like doing an advanced pitch, I'm doing a rise ball, they'll be like, he's like, all right, I got this. And he'll be like this, and the ball will go, poof, and his glove will never move. And I'm like, alrighty then. So I'm like, nice effort. Okay. So next time, glove up. All right. Now it's tough, as you know. I mean, you played fast pitch, so the first couple times you're facing or you're seeing fast pitch and you're not used to it, it can be very, very challenging. And I think that's the part of our sport that's so amazing, is that we grow up in baseball, softball is very American, right? It's our pastime. And new fans to the game can relate to our game because it's basically 2/3 of the baseball game, except we pitch differently. So they can't really compare us to Major League Baseball, and that's why the game shows so well on TV, and that's why our ratings are so good. I was telling some of the guys last night that at the Women's College World Series, how many of you guys watched that, right? It's incredible. Especially, Oregon having a great team, and it's probably been fun to watch that program do so well. But last year, that game between Oklahoma and Florida that went 17 innings, was like 5.5 hours. Boy, that was a marathon. Our ratings at that game at 1 o'clock in the morning Eastern, the ratings were still climbing. And ESPN has really done a lot for our sport, and they will say it is a priority. The women's college game is a priority for their business and for our business, and which is great. Obviously, as a player and someone who's so passionate about the sport, it's great to see. But I think it's comes all the way back to grassroots, to you guys working with the local high school kids. It makes a big difference, to see where our game has gone. So much to the point that when we actually play in Oklahoma City for the Women's College World Series, we used to be on ESPNU or ESPN2. We're now on ESPN. They will bump Yankees, Red Sox to ESPN2 and put us on ESPN, what we call the mothership in the business. So, so it just shows how much the sport has grown. So that's the great part of the growth of the sport, and one of the things that makes us so similar but yet so different is our ability to pitch underhand. So as you know, a lot of times the success of your team kind of lives and dies in the circle. So we'll try to give you all some points, different things to look at. How many of you have pitched yourselves? I know some of you pitch to your kids, but okay, a little bit. All right, so you know the challenges of it. I think it's one little bit of advice is that if you've never pitched, it's good to go out there. Everybody, I feel like every coach should try to learn a little bit of it so you can throw BP to your team. But then it also helps you when you just really want to say to your pitcher, just throw strikes, you know, that you maybe won't say those words because because they're probably trying, they just can't, you know. That's the hard part of it. We joke about it a lot. More times than not, the kids are trying to put the ball over the plate, but they just have a little bit of a disconnect. So I'm going to try to give you some pointers, different things that you can look for from your kids to help them put the ball over the plate. Let's face it, it's a much better game when the batters are swinging and your defense is playing behind your kids versus them walking around the bases. So fundamentals of pitching, it really from the feet up. You got to start right to finish right. It's the same exact thing when we're talking about hitting. If you start wrong, there's a really good chance you're gonna end wrong or things just aren't gonna end pretty. So our pre-motion is a big part of that. From our feet, always want to make sure obviously both of those feet are on the pitching rubber. We start with our weight forward, we rock it back, we load so we can now explode out of or off that pitching rubber. So weight forward, we rock it back, we load. So I look like I'm a track athlete coming out of the box, knee over feet, shoulders over knee, so I'm aggressive and coming toward home plate. Watch your kids, you're going to see a lot of this. A lot of kids are going to be loading in this direction back here, okay? We don't want to do that. We want to make sure when we're coming off the rubber that we're loaded in this position right here, aggressive, head up, and we know that we're going toward home plate, okay? So that's a big thing. Load so we can explode. So from this loaded position coming off of the pitching rubber, we always want to think about getting out on our straight line of force, our power line. I grew up in New Jersey. I didn't start to pitch till I was 15 years old. Trust me, this is about how I learned to pitch, in a gym, inside. And whenever possible, get your kids on a line. This is immediate feedback right here, power line. So I always want to be working down a power line if possible. If you're outside, off that pitching rubber, have them draw a perpendicular line that goes right off the pitching rubber, right out to your 8-foot circle. Okay, again, it's immediate feedback. They can see if they're stepping to the right or to the left. Right? It's simple laws of physics, pitching. Basically, you know, if you're off one side or the other, it's Newton's laws of physics. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So if you're off one side or the other, you're going to pay for it somewhere else through the middle of the motion. All right? So nice and relaxed. We go through our load so we can explode. And when we explode out, I like to think about there being an imaginary box right out here in front of the pitching rubber. And we want to get this leg up and out and over it. We don't want to kick through it. We don't want to walk. We don't want to immediately turn. Some kids will do that. We want to get out and over that box so we can be aggressive and get down on that power line. When we come down on that power line, we want this landing foot to be at a 45-degree angle. Okay, that's going to protect our knee. So we don't want to be straight. We don't want to be completely pointed forward. Right at about 45 degrees. That's going to give me the ability to build a wall with the front side of my body. Same as I'm hitting, pitching, throwing overhand. It's all basic human movement. We move in patterns. The more efficiently we move through those patterns, the less energy we consume, the more energy we put out. Okay? So again, nice and relaxed. We come through, we load, we explode. Okay? So this is my lower body. My upper body, my glove arm is going to be the target. Nice and relaxed, but the target. All right? My pitching arm, nice big pitching arm. So I want to get everything nice and spread out. We call this our X or our power position. Okay, our X or our power position. So from this X or this power position, with everything spread out, we now want to pull everything back together. Okay, so we go from everything together, load, explode, nice and spread out. Ball naturally is going to be facing backward. My glove arm to target. Now we start to pull everything back together. My glove arm is going to come in to the front side of my body as I'm starting to build a wall. Okay, so you hear some coaches say throw against a hard opposite side, or for me as a lefty, I'm throwing against a hard right side. For all the righties, they're throwing against a hard left side that they can really pull all that energy and power into. So as I start to pull in here, this is where it gets really important, our hip angle. Our hips need to be at release at about a 45 to 52 degree angle. Okay, 45, so 90 and 0, about 45 to 52 degrees, right in here. We don't want to be over-rotated, okay? Anytime we start to over-rotate or close the door or whatever it might be that people like to say, and my arm is behind my shoulder, this is called an impingement. This is shortening up the space in my shoulder, and it's going to cause problems, okay? So a couple reasons why we know it's that 45 to 52 degree angle. During the 96 Olympics, they took a video of every single pitcher that threw in the Olympic Games from 3 different angles simultaneously. And they threw all that information into the computer, and what they could do is they could figure out all the different forces that were acting on the pitchers, on their shoulders and everything. So what they found was that pitchers that were right in that 45 to 52 degree angle had the least amount of stress on their shoulder. So there was a game, or I should say a pitcher from Canada. She was a big girl, very strong, threw the ball hard. She threw the ball 69, 70 miles an hour, but she was over-rotated. Her hips were way over-rotated, and they call it a torsion force, or forces that were hanging off of her arm. Every single pitch were 220% of her body weight. And so she was over 200 pounds. So she had close to 500 pounds of body weight pressure hanging off of her shoulder every single pitch. So she'd throw hard for about 3 innings and then poop, run out of gas, because it just wasn't sustainable, okay? I threw my best at 168 pounds, okay? My hip angle would be right in that sweet spot, 45 to 52 degrees. I had 50% of my body weight. So you can see the difference, 500 pounds or about 80 pounds, 70, 80 pounds of pressure. And so that's where your velocity or sustainability comes from. That's why I was very fortunate when I did learn, even though I didn't start to pitch till I was 15, I could not make any mistakes. I had no time to recover, you know, and so I studied physics. I was pre-med, I did everything. I studied human movement because I knew I needed to make up for all the lost time. A lot of pitchers, you know, Lisa Fernandez was 4 years younger than me, but she started pitching at 8, so when we were playing on the U.S. team together, she'd been pitching far longer than I'd been, even though she was younger than I was. So, you know, for me, again, it was all about mechanics and science and studying why were things happening, how could I be most efficient with my body. So that's the big thing. So you can just imagine 80 pounds of pressure versus 500 pounds of pressure. So if I'm throwing the ball 70 miles an hour in the first inning, in Sydney in games, I threw games that went 14 innings, I was throwing 68, 70 miles an hour in the 14th inning. But the only way you do that, the only way that's sustainable is if you're not consuming too much energy throughout the pitch. So that's the key. So that's that 45 to 52 degree angle. But let's go a little bit more, okay? That's the science of it. Let's talk about the performance of it. Why is it so efficient? What really happens when we dial in? So what happens is this back side starts to drive into our front side. And as this back leg drives in, I like to call this pinch. It pinches or it drives in knee to knee, but you can see my back foot. So for me, my left foot is going to be behind my right foot. For righties, you're going to see this. So one of the first things you can look at with your kids to see if they're going to have control problems or if they're kind of beating themselves up is their feet. If you have a right-handed pitcher, left foot down, right should be behind left. If you see right in front of left, the hip's in the way. When the hip's in the way, the arm hits the hip, the ball goes low and inside. So for all you right-handed pitchers, if they're consistently missing low and inside, their hip is in the way. It's that simple. Tell them to kick harder, tell them to get that hip out of the way. That arm has to be in front of the hip. So just remember, right behind left for your righties. For us lefties, it's going to be left behind right. Okay, so what that does is it keeps our hip angle at that 45 to 52 degree angle, and then it allows our upper body to do what it needs to do. And that's this. The arm comes into the core, because we're staying here. Our core is staying, right? Our shoulders and our hips follow each other, right? And almost everything we do, our shoulders and our hips follow each other. Nobody walks down the street like this, okay, right? With their hips going one way and their shoulders going another. They follow each other. So the second I start to turn or rotate my shoulders, it's going to close my hips. We don't want that. We want to stay at that 45 degree angle so that this happens. As my arm comes into my body, my upper arm is going to decelerate, which is going to then accelerate my lower arm through the release phase. So you're going to be able to see that my arm comes into my body and just stays. And that allows my lower arm to be like a whip. And so you can see I'm standing on my power line. I'm not beating myself up. I'm nice and relaxed. The ball has to go in a straight line. This is where consistency comes from. All right, this is what you need, right? If you had a kid that threw strikes, how good would your team be? How much better would your team be, right? Just get your defense out there, be like, come on, right? It's not like walk, oh, hit by pitch, oh, another walk, you right? Yeah, you know the feeling, right? Okay, we've all seen it. But again, if you have a kid, if you have a pitcher that can just be consistent, it changes your world, right? It changes your team. And that's really the key to pitching, is consistency. Once you get that consistency, now you start to hit your corners. Now you start to freeze people. You start moving pitches around where you need to be. But all that comes from this right here. So that 45 to 52 degree angle is what's so important, okay? So again, that arm comes in, and again, as a coach, you're not gonna go up to your pitcher and be like, all right, kiddo, I want you to decelerate that upper arm so you can accelerate that lower arm, right? They're gonna look at you like you have 3 heads, right? That doesn't happen. So you don't even have to worry about it. My point is that's what happens, that's what naturally happens when your hips are at the right angle, okay? So just concentrate on this. Knees together, feet are apart, left behind right, or right behind left, depending if you're a lefty or righty, so that hip is at the right angle. When that hip is at the right angle, the body will do what it's supposed to do. Okay? When we're over-rotated, we push the ball, and look what happens. My upper arm passes past, so I can't whip the ball out. I'm pushing the ball. Okay? Or the same if I'm too open. Okay? All right, so that's where we want to be for the proper hip angle. And as you can see, I'm not beating myself up, pulling my glove arm down into my body. My throwing arm comes in. I now have a brain, right, body relationship. I know where to release the ball. After release, I'm just gonna pull through and step back. I used to teach to walk through, but it's not really realistic. Sometimes we do that if we're throwing a curve ball or a drop ball. Rise ball, a lot of other stuff, we're just stepping back. Because let's face it, by the time we get into this pretty little defensive position, the ball's already in the outfield, okay? So you know how it is with your kids. A lot of times you gotta be working their defense while they're moving. Pitchers are not in a set, position like a corner or a middle will be, right? We're moving when we have to field the ball. So don't be afraid to hit ground balls to your pitcher while they're finishing a pitch, so that they get used to moving out of it. All right, so what's a really good drill? So I'm going to show you this drill that I was just doing here. This is how I warmed up every single day, and this is, again, repetition. So all my weight on my back leg, I'm on my power line, all my weight on my back leg, my front leg is up, and these are my buzzwords. I'm going to, it's a round down pinch. I'm going to come around with my pitching arm, I'm going to step down, and I'm going to pinch. And that's it. This drill right here is how I warmed up my entire career. I do 25 of these. And all I'm doing is reinforcing that hip angle. Really keeping myself nice and relaxed, warming up my shoulder, getting my body thinking about everything, my brain knowing that relationship, and again, building all that consistency. Have your kids, you can buzz through. Okay, another way to make this a really good drill is you could use 2-ball. We call it a 2-ball drill, and so it would be a little bit quicker, and it would help build a little bit more velocity into the pitch. So you'd throw it, and immediately, so this is a good challenge for both your pitcher and your catcher, because she's working on getting that ball back as quick as possible. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, so it's a good little drill to work on mechanics. All right, so that's pinching drill. That's middle part of the drill. So once we release, we've stepped back. We're in a good defensive position. So let's put it all together. So just going to nice and relax, walk through the pitch. I'm just kind of walking through. I'm not really getting out or exploding too much with my legs. Once I start from a set position, I will. So you can have your kids do walkthroughs, just like I was just doing, and then once you do some walkthroughs, or maybe throw from a set position, then You just get from a set position, go through the whole pitch. Come in. Just relax, again, load, and explode. Out. And again, everything should be fluid, nice and relaxed. Okay, so consistency, one of the best things you can do once your kids are warm. First, and again, it depends on total number of pitches, but for me, my first 40 to 80 pitches were fastballs. I'd start low and out, up and out, up and in, low and in. Set of 4. On a light day, I'd do 10 of those sets. On a heavy day, I'd do 20 of them when I wanted to get up toward 80 fastballs. And then I'd throw all my other pitches. And I'd throw my rise, my curve, my drops, all that other stuff. So I'd be at a pitch count between 150 and 200 pitches. Most of your kids, I would imagine, should be 80 to 120, depending. Maybe a little bit more, depending on how advanced they are. But let's do one set. So we'll go, low out, up and out, up and in, low and in. And I'll tell you what, this is it. To me, this is the money. I go to top D1 colleges, and I watch kids throw. These are top pitchers and collegiate kids. They miss of those, they throw those 4 pitches. They're lucky if they hit one of them. I'm like, When I would do sets of like 40 to 80 pitches, if I had to rethrow 2 or 3, I was beside myself. They should be that pinpoint that catcher is rarely moving her glove. If she has to move it like a glove or 2 gloves lengths, that doesn't count. Do it again. Boom. That's it. Because think about it. If your kids can hit those targets for you as a coach and you're calling pitches or your catcher's calling and asking for stuff, it's going to be a good day. You just need that offense to score you a run. All right, so low and out. Up and out. Up and in. Low and in. Okay. It's the second time I've thrown this year. Like in all of 17, I mean, too, like not 18. So, but my point is that I've been retired 10 years. Those were okay. That was a little too sweet down there, a little picky. Yeah, that was a little too sweet, too much on the white. But my point is that, I did that for 25, 30 years, is that your brain picks it up. It's like riding a bike, but you gotta ride the bike correctly, right? You gotta get on the bike, you gotta pedal it correctly. So getting your kids to throw 1 pitch at a time is important. It's amazing how many kids throw 5 here, 5 here. Well, yeah, by the 5th pitch you can hit that spot. They gotta be able to throw and hit that spot, boom. And then move to the next spot, boom, hit it, boom, hit it. That's where the consistency comes from. Okay, does that make sense? You're doing a fabulous job, I just have to say, Kayla. We need to give her a hand, exactly. So you see her, she was like framing those pitches, making me look good. So that's a big part of it, right? Your catchers. Your catchers, catching the ball is a huge part. Receiving the pitches is a really big part of pitching. Okay, so important to get your kids thinking about when they're receiving the ball, if this is the outside corner of the plate, you don't ever want to be catching, so here's the plate. You don't ever want to be catching, we'll show it right-handed, you don't ever want to be catching the ball out of the zone. We always want to make it look like we're catching it into the zone for the umpire. The other thing is try to have your kids stay still as much as possible. For 13 years in Japan, I threw to this great catcher. Her name was Debbie Schneider. She was about 5'2". Man, agile, just excellent. Spoke great Japanese. The umpires loved her. And she was just good. I mean, because we had to overcome that. No matter what, we were still always the foreigner. So we never got like the calls, but we got close to just being like, at least we weren't getting. My first year, let's just put it this way, it was really hard because I had to prove that I wasn't just the gaijin, that I was invested, and we built this great relationship with the Japanese teams, the umpires, the fans. So it was an outstanding experience for me. But as I go through those 13 years, and everyone's used to me throwing to Debbie, then Debbie retires, we have Kristen Rivera, 4-time All-American from Washington. Some of you may remember the name. Amazing, big girl, bigger than me. And very offensive-minded, not as much defensive-minded. And in Japan, everything in the game is quick. They'd be like, you know, you think you're like quick and you're off the bases, this, and all of a sudden they're like, whoop, 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 and this little ninja move, and all of a sudden you're out, and you're like, man, where did that come from? So Kristen had a hard time because she was just used to hitting home runs, and we're like, that's not going to happen here. They're not going to let that happen here. And then on the defensive side of it, she wasn't used to catching. Obviously for me, or even just as being as much a defensive catcher. And there were literally times where I'd be throwing a rise ball, and I'd be looking, and all of a sudden the umpire would disappear. And because she's so big that when she would just move, the umpire was gone. And I was like, well, if I can't see the umpire can't see the ball, so we're never gonna get that call. So I'm like, Kristen, poor thing, I'd be like, you gotta stay down. I was like, you gotta, and she'd be like this. She'd try to crinkle that big old body and be like really teeny. So this little 5'2" Japanese guy would be able to see the pitches and call them strikes. But the point is that you have to adapt to stuff. But receiving the ball is a big part of your pitcher's success, because if the umpire literally cannot see the ball, then you're not going to get the calls. So that is a big part of it. So just, you know, pay attention to that. Watch your pitchers throw, and just see, you know, what's going on. What's your pitcher doing, but then also what's your catcher doing. So, all right, just a couple more pitches here. One of the things I want you to look at is like at the end of my pitch, you can see how I'm nice and relaxed. I'm not really pulling through. I'm just ending the pitch, kind of coming down. My glove arm, though, in order to be in a position where I protect myself, is going to be toward the front side of my body. Okay. So because I keep my glove arm in here, I can protect myself. We don't ever want our kids to be back here, and you see that a lot. That's why some kids end up getting hit, because they can't react. They cannot react in time. So we've got to just make sure that that glove stays in a position where we can protect ourselves. If you watch my eyes, I'm going to look at the target. I'm going to come down and look at my landing spot. Then I'm going to come back up and look at my target. It's very normal, okay? Your kids won't just stay focused on the glove the whole time. It is normal for them to look at the spot, look at their landing, and then come up and find their target again. Okay. All right. Any questions? I mean, I know that was like, whew, really quick.
So in our men's game, when a guy's throwing, he throws up, down, change,
Yep.
maybe a curve.
Uh-huh.
So the word fastball never comes up.
Right.
Girls are throwing fastballs. It's like,
Right. So, and that's a great point, and that's how it was for many years that I pitched. I started throwing my fastball, my actual fastball, my last 4 to 5 years in my career, because if my rise ball was clocking at, say, 66, 67, and my curve was 68, my fastball, I could juice that through at like 70 miles an hour, and it would still have a little wiggle or whatever, but that extra 2 miles an hour would just freeze up hitters, especially if I threw it inside to them.
call it fastball.
I called it a fastball, yeah. And it had a little bit of cut and run too, because I threw a two-seam fastball. So that was the other thing too. I threw a two-seam fastball this way, versus a lot of pitchers will throw this. This was my drop ball across the smile. Yeah, I have, I do. Yes, yeah, you're right. No, if you, so, okay, you know what? Yeah. Lisa Fernandez had hands about the size of you, and this is how she threw all her pitches. Like her pinky was, I mean, this is how she held the ball. In her fingers, though. My pinky never even touches, and she would be like, oh, Smitty, whatever. You know, she'd be like, I can't believe you. But that's the way she threw. I mean, her entire fingers were around that ball, and she stayed through. But remember, it's the same thing. Just we were talking about hitting. pitching, it's the same thing. These are your most powerful fingers. They have to stay behind the ball the longest to get that spin, get that ball spinning and moving in the direction you want to. But yes, make sure that they're gripping the ball. But yes, fastball is your basic form. Everything comes off of that. And I've seen a lot of kids that don't practice their basic form or their fastball, and all of a sudden they're throwing a drop, and now all of a sudden their stride, instead of being, 6 or 7 of their own feet, it's 5, because they're shortening up, and their pitches start to meld into one really bad style. So I always say that your fastball form or your basic mechanics, that's your foundation. Everything else is built off of that. So you've got to have them throw off of basic mechanics, fastball, whatever it is you want to call it. But don't be afraid to use that pitch. In college, the college coaches nowadays, a lot of kids are throwing fastballs. Don't let them fool you. Yeah. There was another question. Yes?
So for young pitchers, the landing spot you referenced earlier is pretty important. The landing spot?
Yes, yes.
Is there a way to sort of get that measured out before they start going through their drills, so just kind of get it out of the way? Because I struggle with that a little bit, like finding that perfect landing spot.
Right. So yeah, so that's a good question. A lot of people are like, so where should the landing spot be? What's the distance? So typically, not always, every kid's a little different depending on how long their legs are and their size. But typically, if you're using your legs correctly, of your own feet from the pitching rubber, it should be about 7 to 7.5 of your own feet. And that's typically where a good landing spot is, that they're aggressive. Because let's face it, as a woman, our most powerful part of our body are our legs and our butt. We have to use our legs to get off the pitching rubber. I mean, back in the day, I was a decent-sized athlete. Nowadays, I'd probably be a second baseman, because all the pitchers nowadays are like 6'10". I mean, granted, if you looked at it was like Lisa and then me, but if you looked at the other pitchers, Lori Harrigan, Danielle Henderson, Michele Granger was about the same size as me. But there were some pitchers that were bigger than we were. But nowadays, we're small. I mean, the kids nowadays are like 6'4", 220 pounds, I'm like, man, wonder what I could have done if I had all that, So it's amazing. I mean, the athletes are big, they're strong, but it still comes down to efficiency, using your body. I was very, as you could tell with my science and all that stuff, very dialed in. I threw my best at 168 pounds. I threw my best when I could clean and jerk X number of pounds over my head, squat this, bench press that. I mean, I was dialed in to a T where I knew I needed to be. Some people are not like that. They're just like, whatever. And they go out and play. I was very meticulous about my stuff. So we're all just a little bit different. But yeah, the landing spot is big. 6.5 to 7, making sure you're coming down and that it's on that power line. Okay? We don't want to be off one side or the other. So let me throw a couple pitches. Let's say I'm going to open up. I'm going to be open, so for me, I'm going to be to the right of the power line. And it's going to affect my hips, like the way. So again, remember how I talked, it's physics. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. More times than not, if I'm coming this way, the ball's going to be going that way. All right? If I'm over-rotated and I'm closing here, a lot of times my arm will hit my hip and I'll squirt the ball off, or I'll try to get my arm around my hip. That's going to create problems as well. Okay? So remember, the problem can be from striding incorrectly, but can also be from the hip being early. All right? Pitching is timing. Every single pitch is a matter of having perfect timing where that arm comes through and gets through before the hip is in the way. All right? And that allows that arm to just explode up through. If my hip is a little bit early and I'm over-rotated, doesn't matter. You could throw 100 good pitches, 101, you over-rotated, out of the park, right? Because you leave it lazy, all right? So that's a big part. It's like a train on a track. Really focus on foot up, down in a good landing spot so the rest of the body can take care of business. Okay? All right. One last thing before we break for lunch. I did want to talk a little bit about the backyard bullpen that JUGS came out with. I think this is interesting because it does a couple of things. As well as just a net like this. How many of y'all when you work your infield drills, we'll just put nets up at the bags. Okay? One of the best things you can do so that everybody's working ground balls and your first baseman isn't 100 times running back to the bag. Running back to the back just to receive the ball. I mean, they have to do a certain amount of that. That is their job. But one of the best things you can do are put these, the nets at the bags and have your fielders throw to the net. More than likely, if you have a decent size first baseman specifically, they're gonna if they throw anywhere in this net, it should be able to be caught. Doesn't mean it's always gonna be pretty, but more than likely, we want to be a little tighter than that, so sometimes you can put a little bit more of a target on it. But one of the best things that you can do, because then you're not always running after balls or whatever, the more balls, you should never get rid of balls. The more balls that you have, the better, because the more you can do in practice. And you just hit ground balls, your kids are picking it up, boom, thrown across into the net, right? Your first baseman's up the line. She could be working bunts, throwing over to third base. Your third baseman could be picking up, going to first, same with the middles. You know, second baseman, well, coming back that way to second or whatever it is. So, all right, so those are fabulous. One of the best things you can do are those nets. So underutilized. So underutilized. One of the best things you can do for your defense. You will get so many more reps in. It's unbelievable. So put those up, okay? And then, let's face it, when you're working defense, unless you have like 4 catchers on the team, which I'm assuming most of you don't.
I have 3.
You have 3? That's good. Okay, so the riches, right? That's good, okay? Because a lot of times we don't. I mean, I can't tell you the number of teams that I was on where I needed to go warm up for a game and there was nobody to catch me. Yeah, not good. But that's why if you even have a net like this, it's good because now you've got a pitcher. Yes, you can throw to a net or a sock net, but when you have this, now it's a little bit more dialed in, so you're having the kids think about mechanics, think about throwing to corners, not just aimlessly whipping the ball into a net. Okay, so that's one of the reasons I like it. The other thing that this will come with is the ability to pick up a ball, and it will tell you. It will tell you basically it's a 3-0 count. What's that mean? Means we need a strike, and it'll basically show you where to throw the ball. Right? Hopefully we're not at 3-0, but if you are at 3-0, so here's an 0-2. So now you're way ahead, and it'll give you an idea that I want to throw either low and in or lower out. In other words, I don't need a strike right now. So it's a great little package for your kids to go out and practice on their own, and it gets them thinking, not just mindlessly throwing. All right. You can also challenge them outside of the actual numbered balls. You can also challenge them to throw to those 4 corners, and those 4 corners are broken down even more into basically 8 corners. So you can work on you know, your 4 corners, but you can work on being even a little more specific. So I'm going to throw one here, but now I'm going to throw another one here. I'm going to throw one here and another one here. So again, it's immediate feedback. It's stuff that your kids can do on their own. Well, maybe you don't have the chance to be working. Nowadays, most of your pitchers are probably playing other positions, I would assume, right? Okay, especially at the high school level. But still, it's a great training package for your kids to be able to use. The other thing as well is there's no reason why you also can't have some of your kids who have throwing problems on the infield, if you're middles, is to get them really dialing in. I mean, this is great, but this will give you even a little bit more, because now the mindset's a little bit different. If you've got your shortstop going into the 5-6 hole, and she needs to work on getting the throw over to your second baseman, so you put that right in front of second base, and you have her aim for the red. Obviously, as a pitcher, we don't want to throw it in the red. Okay. But your other kids, exactly, your other kids, you can go ahead and have them thinking about where's my easiest turn for change of direction, right? Especially your middles, because they're just redirecting the ball. Any questions on that? So anyway, so that's just a fun little package to play with, or especially for younger pitchers with parents. You know, my dad, I know he kind of got tired of catching for me, so it was part of it. So part of the package, I guess, when you start to learn to pitch, unless you're lucky enough to have a sibling that will be your catcher. So that wasn't the case for me. So all right, any questions on hitting before we take a before you take a lunch. Excuse me, pitching before you take a lunch
So
break.
I heard you talk about hip angle.
Yeah.
And how much force that can put on the
Yeah.
arm. When I was in college, my pitcher wore out her hip and her knee.
Okay.
And I'm sure it was physics.
Mm-hmm.
And what are the number one things that we can do to prevent our pitchers from developing chronic problems with their joints?
Right. So, yeah, overuse is a big part of all sports involved. But so the question was, what can we do to help your pitchers and their joints specifically to help the overuse? So, a couple of things. When I was younger, I ran all the time. So then I, started being like, oh, my hip's a little sore, because pitching is high impact. When you're jamming that opposite side of your body in the ground and really pulling in, yeah, there's times if your foot is off, that's going to be really hard on the knee, which is then really hard on the hip. So all those, that's why that 45-degree angle that the foot gets down is also extremely important. So really watch for the effort that your pitcher is putting in. So I have to tell you a quick story before we go. So that's one thing. Cycling, any of their training, don't have them doing long runs. Sprints are okay. Get them on a bike, conditioning their body, weight training, all that sort of stuff. Healthy diets, all that stuff makes a big thing. But a lot of it is with the overuse, it comes down to mechanics. It really is. And one of the things, I think the biggest compliment that I would get at times throughout my career are people be like, oh, wow, when you pitch, it's so beautiful. It's like effortless. It just looks natural. And one day in a broadcast, we have a lot of fun when we broadcast, but I just had an idea, and I just thought, I'm just going to say this, and I really don't know what the reaction is going to get. My boss actually happened to be producing the games. Our coordinating producer that oversees all of softball just happened to be the producer for this particular game, and so it was me and Beth Mowens, and it might have been Jessica Mendoza, it may have been the three of us in the booth, but we were talking about pitching and effort and what it looks like, how some pitchers are so relaxed and the ball's just shooting out. And it's just for hitters, it's just like, how can she keep doing that? First inning, fifth inning, seventh inning, 10th inning, it just keeps coming. And then there's other pitchers that you're like, whew, that looks painful, and then I was thinking about this. Back in the day, they would always say, and here's the delivery, right? You'd hear the play-by-play, right? Especially Major League Baseball. Goes to the mound, 3-1 count, and here's the delivery, 3-1. And I'm like, so I started thinking, why are they calling it the delivery? And then I was watching this one pitcher, and I was like, well, because sometimes pitchers look like they're birthing the ball instead of throwing the ball. It is. And so I said that. I actually said that on the air. And I said, because some pitchers look like they're birthing the ball. And my producer gets in my ear and she goes, excuse me, did you just say birthing the ball? Did you just say birthing the ball live on television? And I was like, yes, I did. But it's true, because there's some pitchers that are just like, that's a birth, right? That is just like, whoop, that's the delivery. No, but the point is that, back to your question on it, it really comes down to human movement and the ability for anything. It doesn't matter if you're hitting or if it's, a professional golfer. When they do stuff in a really beautiful pattern, it looks right. And it sounds right, right? When someone hits the ball, you can hear it when it comes off the bat. Or when they pitch, and that ball just comes through. So it really comes down to fluidity of mechanics and just the ability to take pressure off of the joints that don't need to have pressure on them. But so mechanics, hip angles, 45 degrees, 52, 45 to 52 for the hip angle. All that stuff over time makes, it's little stuff, but it makes a profound difference throughout the career of an athlete. Even a 4-year career in high school, that potentially becomes another 4-year career in college. So, yes?
Sorry, earlier end of all of this with young kids, that a lot of them that come with the softball little league never pitched before.
Right.
So understanding a lot of the mechanics that you introduced to us here, is there an algorithm or something in your mind in terms of breaking it down for these kiddos who have never
Yeah.
stepped on?
Honestly, the big thing is getting it in their mindset that hitting your targets is just as good as throwing a rise ball that doesn't rise or a rise ball that's, kids, kids want to hit the home run, they want to throw the rise, they want the sexy stuff, right? They want the big thing. The big thing doesn't make you successful. The big thing is what comes after years and years of work. So it's like dialing it back down for those pitchers to realize it's about your ability to throw strikes, to hit your spots, to work from ahead. And in order to do that, it's as simple as just starting out understanding what it's like. I mean, a little ones, it's amazing. You just get them walking through the pitch and just doing that, not overthrowing it, not trying to throw it as hard as they can, but feeling it, learning proper mechanics, learning to hit a ball with maybe nothing in your hand. I would walk around my house like this. My sisters thought I was crazy. Okay? I would walk around the house just going through the pitching motion. Same thing like I talked about, those little Japanese, those 12-year-old kids that look like they had swings like Major League Baseball players, because they would just do this for hours. They would just swing, both right and left-handed, for hours, and just learn the mechanics of it. So that's a lot of it, is just feeling it, learning it. You know, our body doesn't really develop, you probably have heard of proprioception, or your ability for your brain to figure out what your body's doing when it's not looking at it. You ask a lot of kids, what's my hand doing behind my head? They have to look at it. Oh, my palm's down. Because that relationship doesn't really build until you're like 19, 20 years old. Well, that doesn't help you when you're coaching 14 to 17-year-olds, right? So the more you can build that dance, you know, rhythm, any sort of stuff where they're learning to feel their body, will help them develop into a better athlete quicker. So, all right, you guys hungry? Maybe? Hungry for more softball or hungry for food? Okay. Anyway, I think we're going to take a quick lunch break, and then we're going to do a Q&A and some stuff afterwards. So yeah, think of questions, because I know I kind of blew through a lot of stuff. We never really covered overhand throwing, anything. So whatever it is, just think about stuff, and we'll get some more info out there.